Story 1. Some smiles are not meant for warmth. Some are born of shadow, carved into the twilight, and once seen, they never truly leave you. They become a permanent fixture in the landscape of your nightmares, a cold, sharp shard of memory that glints in the dark. For me, that smile belonged to a man I barely knew, a man who, for a terrifying stretch of time, knew far too much about me and my sister Kate. And it all began with a simple text message. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the air bites with a promise of winter, and the fallen leaves crunch underfoot like brittle secrets. Kate, my younger sister by 2 years, was sprawled on the living room sofa, engrossed in her phone, while I was attempting to focus on an essay at my desk. Our father, a man of routine and predictability, was supposed to be at work. His absence from the house was as normal as the sun rising. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Dad. "Hey girls, could you do me a huge favor? Forgot my lunch. I'm in the old woods near the big oak. Could you bring me something quick? Love you." I frowned, rereading the text. Dad never forgot his lunch. He was meticulous. And the old woods? That was a patch of dense, neglected forest bordering the back of our property, rarely ventured into by anyone but the occasional hiker or intrepid dog walker. It wasn't exactly a convenient lunch spot for a busy workday. "Kate," I called out, "did Dad text you about lunch?" She glanced up, her brow furrowed. "Yeah, just now. Said he's in the woods. Weird, right? Why wouldn't he just come home?" A prickle of unease started at the base of my neck. Exactly. And the big oak? There are a lot of big oaks in those woods. Maybe he just wanted some fresh air. Kate offered, though her tone lacked conviction. He did mention he had a stressful morning. Despite the oddity, it was Dad, and he had asked for a favor. We debated for a few minutes, our instincts warring with our filial duty. In the end, the desire to help our father, coupled with the thought of a quick walk in the beautiful autumn air, won out. We quickly assembled a couple of sandwiches, grabbed a thermos of coffee, and set off. Our backpacks slung over our shoulders, the woods were beautiful, but eerily quiet. The canopy of bare branches filtered the afternoon sun into dappled, shifting patterns on the leaf-strewn ground. We called out for Dad, our voices swallowed by the vastness. With each step deeper into the trees, the unease grew. The silence felt heavy, watchful. "Dad, are you here?" I shouted again, my voice trembling slightly. Suddenly, a rustle in the undergrowth. My heart leaped. "Dad?" A figure emerged from behind a thick cluster of pines. But it wasn't our father. He was a tall man, lean and wiry, dressed in dark, nondescript clothing. His face was gaunt, with eyes that seemed to hold too much light. A disturbing glint that sent a chill straight through me. And in his hand he held a phone, our father's phone. My breath hitched. "Who are you?" I demanded, pulling Kate back a step. He didn't answer. He just stood there, a slow, unsettling smile spreading across his face. It was the smile of a predator, utterly devoid of warmth, full of chilling anticipation. My blood ran cold. "Where's our dad?" Kate whispered, her voice barely audible. The man took a step forward, then another. The smile widened, showing uneven teeth. He raised the phone slightly, almost as if in a mocking gesture. "He's busy," he rasped, his voice gravelly and low. Before we could react, he lunged. It was a blur of motion, a sudden, terrifying explosion of violence. He moved with an unnerving speed, his eyes fixed on us with an intensity that promised no good. I shoved Kate behind me, screaming as he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. The sandwiches and thermos fell to the ground, scattering. Pure terror flooded my veins. This wasn't a mugging. This felt far more sinister. We fought, fueled by adrenaline and sheer panic. Kate, small but feisty, kicked out at him, landing a blow to his shin. He grunted in pain, momentarily loosening his grip. That was all we needed. "Run, Kate, run!" I yelled, tearing my arm free and pushing her hard towards the direction we'd come from. We sprinted through the woods, our lungs burning, the sound of our feet crunching on leaves deafening in our ears. I could hear his footsteps behind us, heavy and relentless. We didn't look back. We just ran, pushing past branches that clawed at our faces and clothes, stumbling over roots, our only thought survival. Finally, we burst out of the tree line, gasping for air, our legs screaming in protest. We didn't stop until we reached our front door, fumbling with the lock, our hands shaking so violently we could barely turn the key. We collapsed inside, panting, tears streaming down our faces. The house, usually a sanctuary, now felt exposed, vulnerable. "Dad," I choked out, remembering the man had his phone. What if he had him? What if he'd hurt him? Just then, the front door opened, and our father walked in, whistling a cheerful tune, his briefcase in hand. He stopped dead, his smile fading as he saw our disheveled, terrified faces. "Amber, Kate, what happened? Why are you crying?" he asked, rushing over to us. Relief, so potent it made my knees weak, washed over me. He was safe. He was home. Between gasps and sobs, we tried to explain. "Your phone... a man. In the woods... he attacked us." Dad's face drained of color. "My phone? What are you talking about? I haven't had my phone all day. I think I left it at the coffee shop this morning." The words hit us like a physical blow. His phone had been stolen. The message hadn't been from him. It had been a trap. The man hadn't just found his phone. He had used it. He had known our numbers. He had known our names. He had known to lure us to a secluded spot. The reality of it was far more horrifying than the physical encounter. This wasn't random. This was calculated. We spent the rest of the afternoon huddled together, the fear a cold knot in our stomachs. Dad called the police, who took our statements, their faces grim. They searched the woods, but found nothing. No trace of the man, no discarded phone. Just the scattered remains of our ill-fated lunch. Night fell, bringing with it a new wave of terror. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. I jolted awake, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was an unknown number. Against my better. Story 2. The snow was coming down thick and fast, a blinding white curtain that made the world disappear. I was driving home for the holidays, taking a back road I thought would be a shortcut. That was my first mistake. The road was slick with ice I couldn't see, and before I knew it, the car was spinning. It slammed sideways into a ditch with a sickening crunch of metal. I was okay, just shaken up, but the car was totaled. No cell service, of course. Just me, the falling snow, and the dead silence of a deserted forest road. I figured I'd just have to wait for a snowplow or another car to pass. I sat in the cold car for what felt like an eternity. The silence was the worst part. It was so absolute, it felt heavy. Then I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A crack, like a heavy branch snapping, but deeper, more resonant. It came from the woods just beyond the ditch. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the snow weighing down a tree. But then it came again, closer this time. My heart started pounding against my ribs. I'm not easily scared, but something about this felt wrong. Curiosity, or maybe just sheer stupidity, got the better of me. I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from my glove compartment and stepped out of the car. The cold hit me like a physical blow. I shined the light into the woods, and that's when I saw them. Footprints. They were fresh, starkly clear in the newly fallen snow. But they weren't human. They were too large, too deep. And they weren't from any animal I recognized. They looked almost like they were made by something walking on two legs, but the shape was all wrong. And next to the tracks, blood. Bright red drops staining the pure white snow, leading from the road deep into the trees. Against all my better judgment, I followed the trail. I told myself maybe an animal had been hit by a car before I crashed. Maybe it needed help. The tracks led me about 50 yards into the forest. The trees closing in around me, their snow-laden branches muffling the world. And then I found the source of the blood. It was a deer, or what was left of one. The body was lying in a small clearing, steam still rising from the fresh wound, but its head was gone. Not ripped off by a predator, but severed. The cut was clean, precise, too clean. There was no sign of a struggle, just the motionless body in the snow. My blood ran cold. Whatever did this was not an animal. Panic finally set in. I turned and ran, scrambling back through the snow, stumbling over roots I couldn't see. I didn't stop until I reached the relative safety of my car. I wrenched the door open, gasping for breath, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. I threw myself into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, fumbling to lock it. My heart was a drum against my ribs. I took a deep breath to calm my nerves, and my eyes adjusted to the dim interior of the car. And then I saw it. Sitting on the passenger seat, staring directly at me with glassy, dead eyes, was the severed head of the deer. I don't think I screamed. I think the sound that came out of me was something more primal, a choked gasp of pure terror. I scrambled out of the car, falling backward into the snow, crab-walking away from the horrifying sight. My mind just couldn't process it. How? I was only gone for a few minutes. Who or what could move that fast, that silently, and why? Why put the head in my car? Was it a warning? A gift? I didn't wait to find out. I just ran. I ran down that deserted road in the middle of a blizzard, not looking back, fueled by a terror so profound it felt like it was physically tearing me apart. I must have run for miles before the lights of an approaching truck cut through the snow. It was a local farmer. He took one look at my hysterical, half-frozen state and drove me to the nearest town. I called my dad, my voice shaking so badly I could barely form words. He arrived a few hours later, and after I'd calmed down enough to explain what happened, he insisted we go back. He's a practical man, a hunter, and he figured it was probably some local pranksters, or maybe I'd imagined the whole thing in my post-accident shock. He wanted to get my car towed and file a police report. So, armed with his high-powered rifle and a heavy dose of skepticism, we drove back to the crash site. The snow had lightened, but the road was still empty. My car was exactly where I'd left it, a broken shape in the ditch. But as we got closer, I knew something was different. The forest was silent again. We cautiously approached the car. I braced myself, but when I peered through the passenger window, the deer head was gone. My dad opened the door. The seat was empty, but it wasn't clean. There was a massive dark bloodstain soaked deep into the fabric, a gruesome reminder that I hadn't imagined it. My dad, now looking pale and unsettled, went to check the woods. I stayed by the car, my fear returning with a vengeance. He came back a few minutes later, shaking his head. The deer carcass was gone too. All that remained were the strange footprints, now partially filled with new snow, and a long, deep drag mark leading from the clearing past my car and disappearing back into the impenetrable darkness of the forest. Whatever had been there had come back. It had cleaned up after itself. We got the car towed and left that place as fast as we could. We never filed a police report. What would we have said? That a ghost left a deer head in my car? They'd have thought we were crazy. For weeks, I had nightmares. I'd see those glassy eyes, that perfectly severed neck. But the image wasn't the most terrifying part of the memory. It was the message. I didn't realize I'd received one until weeks later, when the memory started to play over and over in my head like a broken record. As I had scrambled out of the car, away from that horrific sight, a thought had pushed its way into my mind. It wasn't my own thought. It was calm, clear, and cold. It felt ancient and powerful. It wasn't in words, more like a pure, direct understanding planted straight into my consciousness. The message was simple. You are a guest here. Remember that. I've never driven down a back road at night again. I stick to the brightly lit highways now. But sometimes, when I'm driving late and I pass a dark stretch of woods, I feel a cold dread creep up my spine. I feel like I'm being watched by something old, something powerful, something that owns the darkness between the trees. And I remember that I am just a guest, and I've never forgotten it. Story 3. This happened a few winters ago when I was living alone in a small town nestled deep in the forests of Quebec. The winters there are brutal, but also breathtakingly beautiful. I lived in a cozy little house at the edge of the woods with my golden retriever, Monty. One of my favorite things to do was take him for long walks on the snowy trails behind my house. It was my own private winter wonderland. I'm also hard of hearing, so the silence of the snow-covered forest was something I found incredibly peaceful. It was just me, Monty, and the muffled quiet of the world. One afternoon, the snow was falling thick and fast, blanketing everything in a fresh layer of white. Monty was loving it, bounding through the deep drifts and occasionally disappearing up to his chest in powder. We went further than usual that day, exploring a path that was less traveled. Deep into the woods, maybe a mile from my house, I saw something that didn't belong. It was a flash of bright blue against the endless white and gray. As we got closer, I realized it was a tarp strung up between two pine trees to create a crude, makeshift shelter. Underneath it, there was a dirty sleeping bag and some empty food cans scattered in the snow. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Squatters weren't common out here, especially not in the dead of winter. It was too harsh, too unforgiving. Whoever was staying here had to be desperate or something else entirely. I pulled on Monty's leash, a sudden urgency telling me to leave. This was someone's space, and I felt like I was trespassing. I called Monty, my voice sounding small in the vast forest, and we turned back towards home. We hadn't gone more than 100 feet when Monty suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. The fur on his back stood up, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. I looked up and my heart jumped into my throat. A man was standing on the path ahead of us, not 20 feet away. He was tall, impossibly so, and was wearing a full white camouflage jacket and pants, the hood pulled up low over his face. He blended in so perfectly with the snowy trees that I hadn't seen him at all. What scared me was that he must have walked right past us to get there. I'm hard of hearing, yes, but I'm not deaf. I would have heard the crunch of his boots in the snow, or at least Monty would have reacted. But there had been nothing. Just the whisper of the falling snow, and then suddenly him. He was just standing there, perfectly still, watching us. I couldn't see his face under the hood, just a dark shadow where it should have been. I gripped Monty's leash so tight my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I tried to act casual, giving a tight, awkward wave and saying, "Hi there," though the words came out as a shaky whisper. The man didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, a silent, white phantom in the falling snow. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run. I tugged Monty's leash and started walking, forcing myself to move past the man. I kept my eyes fixed on the path ahead, refusing to look at him, but I could feel his gaze burning into the side of my head. We walked past him, and he didn't move a muscle. I didn't dare look back until we were much further down the path. When I finally did, he was gone, vanished as silently as he had appeared. The walk back home was terrifying. Every snap of a twig, every shadow between the trees, made me jump. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced I would see that white figure following us, but the path remained empty. When we finally burst out of the tree line and into the safety of my backyard, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I locked the door behind us, checking it twice. I told myself I was overreacting. He was probably just a hunter or some recluse who lived in the woods. Nothing to worry about. That evening, I tried to push the encounter out of my mind. I made dinner, put on a movie, and curled up on the couch with Monty. The snow had stopped, and a bright moon shone down, making the snow in my backyard glitter. Around 10 o'clock, Monty, who was dozing at my feet, suddenly shot up. He ran to the large glass patio door that looked out onto the backyard and started barking frantically, a deep, aggressive bark I rarely heard from him. I muted the TV and went over to see what was wrong. My blood ran cold. Standing in the middle of my yard, bathed in the moonlight, was the man from the forest. He was wearing the same white camo, but this time his hood was down. His face was gaunt and pale, with dark, sunken eyes that were fixed on me, on the house. He just stood there, perfectly still, staring. It was him. There was no doubt he had followed me home. I scrambled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. I whispered to the operator, telling them there was a man in my backyard, that he wouldn't leave, that he was the same man I'd seen in the woods. They said officers were on their way. While I was on the phone, he started walking. Slowly, deliberately, he walked right up to the patio door. He raised a hand and pressed it against the glass, leaving a steamy print. His eyes, dark and empty, never left mine. It felt like he was looking straight through me, into my soul. I backed away from the door, pulling Monty with me. Then he started testing the handle, jiggling it up and down. When it didn't open, he balled his hand into a fist and began to pound on the glass. Boom, boom. The sound vibrated through the whole house. Monty was going crazy, barking and snarling, throwing himself against the door. I was screaming into the phone for the police to hurry. The man showed no emotion. He just kept pounding, his face a blank, terrifying mask. Suddenly, he stopped. He took a step back from the door. For a moment, I thought he was giving up. Then I saw him bend down and pick up one of the large, heavy rocks that lined my garden path. My heart stopped. He lifted the rock over his head. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the muscles in his arms tense. I saw the cold moonlight glint off his eyes. I screamed. With a deafening crash, the rock smashed through the glass. Shards of the patio door exploded inwards, skittering across the floor. A hole, big enough for a man to climb through, gaped open to the cold night. A frigid wind blew into the room, carrying the scent of pine and snow. But before he could take a step inside, the wail of sirens cut through the night, growing closer and closer. His head snapped towards the sound. The blank expression on his face finally broke, replaced by something that looked like anger or maybe frustration. He dropped the rock, turned, and sprinted back towards the forest. He moved with an unsettling speed and agility, disappearing into the dark tree line just as the first police car screeched into my driveway. The police searched the woods for hours with dogs and flashlights, but they found nothing. The makeshift shelter with the blue tarp was gone, too. There was no sign that anyone had ever been there, except for a single set of large footprints leading away from my shattered patio door and into the forest, until they just stopped. They found no other tracks, no sign of a vehicle. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I sold that house a month later. I couldn't stay there anymore. I couldn't look at the woods without seeing that tall, silent figure in white. I couldn't sleep without hearing the sound of fists pounding on glass. I moved to the city, surrounded by people and noise and lights. But sometimes, on quiet winter nights when the snow is falling, I still think about him. I think about those dark, empty eyes, and I wonder what he wanted. I wonder if he's still out there, in the deep, silent forests of Quebec, waiting in the snow. I hope I never find out. Thanks for listening to my story. Stay safe out there, and maybe think twice before walking alone in the woods. Thanks for watching. If you have any similar unexplained stories, share them in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange tales from the dark corners of the world. Stay safe out there.